The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMZ.
Hi, everybody. This is Peter Evers, and welcome to another edition of Humanity First. Today, we are going to talk about immigration. It is on the lips of so many millions of people. It is one of the issues that really divides this country and pretty much goes down the politics of the left and the right. I am a naturalized citizen of America, and because of that, I have an awful lot of friends who also have that status by green card, by temporary protected status, or whatever. They might be here on H-1B working visas. And I have a lot of conversations with people, and they are terrified at the moment. They're terrified of what might happen to them because of they perceive that the ICE folks are coming to particular towns, Boston being one of them, of course, because we're a sanctuary city in Boston, but also Massachusetts, because Massachusetts is a blue state, who have not necessarily agreed with this administration. That fear runs deep, and that fear also of dehumanization of a group who have been othered entirely by an administration that speaks openly with language which, to be honest with you, is very old and very, very difficult to hear from somebody who has that status. So we're going to talk to an immigration lawyer, as I said before. And we're going to find out what you can do as an immigrant and what ICE can do, and talk a little bit about where the Supreme Court is involved in this and where the administration. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm an essential worker here at BAMZ, and I'm a nurse. Nurses are essential here at BAMZ because as nurses, we really have the opportunity to make an impact. We have very small ratios, so we have the opportunity to really learn everything about the person served and be able to give the best care. It really serves such a great purpose for me as being a nurse, and really why I came into nursing. Learn more about nursing opportunities at bamzjobs.org.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMZ.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Humanity First. As we said at the top of the hour, we have a very special guest to talk to us. And I think the timing of this, when Melanie, when you and I were talking earlier, we said it's a good time to have this conversation. But in my view, it's a terrible time that we're going through. And so I think the idea today is to talk a little bit about what people who are non-documented, what their rights are and what they can do under certain circumstances. So we have with us today, as promised, Melanie Malherbe, who is a retired legal aid lawyer, but also has a great deal of experience working with immigrant populations. And Melanie, I know that's been a tough road to hoe over the past few decades, I would say, because immigration is one of those touch points that people in America tend to go to in difficult times. And I'm not just sort of saying America, but when I think about Britain, where I'm from, I think about the Windrush generation in the 1950s who were begged to come to this country. And as soon as there was a downturn in the economy, they were vilified. And many of them suffer the scars of that from way, way back. So we're not dealing with a new issue, and you of all people should know that. Welcome to the show, Melanie. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's just bring us up to date with the administration at the moment. There has been probably more radical change in the last however months the administration has been. It seems like a number of years to me. And one of the sort of dog whistles for the right has been this issue of immigration. If you look around the world, that's been something that the whole world is talking about because of forced movement of populations due to various things. One is economic conditions caused by other countries. But Let's talk about some of the things that are going on at the moment. So the first question I have for you is, the administration said initially they were going to target individuals without permission and remain and be had committed crimes here or in another country. From stories in the news, this doesn't seem to be what's happening. Can you tell us a little bit about which immigrants may be arrested? Who should be worried about this? I guess the first thing I would say, everybody should be worried, right?
That's right. Picking up on your comments about dehumanization, I think the assertions about crime and all the horrendous things said about immigrants, criminals and murderers and bringing in drugs, etc., is not really a target, but part of the dehumanization effort. For example, just today, the news reports of what ICE said about arrests in Boston on Tuesday. ICE declined to give the total number of people arrested, but they provided little squibs on the 7 that had any kind of a criminal record. And, I think that's intentional to, foster this largely erroneous view of immigrants in the United States. Before the election, even before the administration, the administration characterized immigrants as invading the country, as if they were far in power, invading the country. And the purpose of that was to try to justify actions that conflict with well-established law, existing laws on the books passed by Congress, to justify it as if we're in a wartime due to immigrants, which is absurd, since we know they're working on farms, they're working in packing plants, they're working as landscapers and caregivers, etc. My immigrant clients in my 45 years of practice, are nothing like that. I first worked in rural Florida with migrant farm workers living in horrendous conditions, and who was violating the law? The employers. We're skirting the minimum wage. I had lawsuits and I could explain how that happened, but in Massachusetts, where I've worked the largest part of my career, I worked with many mothers with children who experience, brutal and traumatizing events in their countries of origin. I've had mothers and children who witnessed the murder of family and friends, including murder or disappearance of a husband, father. The mothers fled with their children, often on foot, walking for days, then made it to refugee camps where they languished for years, waiting to be admitted to the United States as refugees or persons seeking asylum. Other of my clients were brought here by spouses who married them in the client's home country. My clients have pretty much all been women in this situation, brought over here and then treated abusively in all manner of ways, control exerted through violence, but notably also through holding the club of the wife getting legal permanent status over the wife's head. And the illegal behavior was on the part of the person who'd become a citizen by falsely filing tax returns, for example. I was involved in a project to get the COVID stimulus payment and child tax credits for eligible parents, and typically the mothers were eligible, escaped into domestic violence shelter, but the fathers falsely filed joint returns, and one of them years later now just resolved, and my client's getting her full payment. I can stop there. But, going back to targeting, the president and his administration, have made clear that states with Democratic majorities and states with cities that choose not to have their police forces engage in ICE functions, not local police functions, but ICE functions, they are being targeted. That's the massive target.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing, isn't it? The story that you tell is one of a vulnerable class of people, people who are running from something, whether it be economic hardship or, they're vulnerable politically. I have a friend who from Bhutan who spent 10 years in a refugee camp waiting to come to America. That journey in itself is massively traumatizing. When those people get here, they're at the whim of, farmers, for instance, or somebody who is looking for cheap labor. And yet the people targeted, and I think the interesting thing that I read was that the administration made an exception for farm workers, but would allow the owners of the farms to dictate how much they worked when they worked, and wouldn't have them working part-time, but basically they would be almost indentured to the farm under those circumstances. The tables have really turned, and to tell a story of the opposite, which is these people are criminals. And by the way, some of them are, and you mentioned earlier on that piece of the law hasn't changed, right? About if you are a person who breaks the law, you are subject to being essentially escorted out of the country, right?
Right. That's grounds to reverse, to rescind legal permanent resident status, or to rescind other permissions given to remain in the country while immigration cases are pending. And that's been the law for a long time. So, but that does not produce anywhere near the number of immigrants that the administration has proclaimed it will be removing from the country. So obviously ICE had to turn much more broadly elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so that's the question I think that I have, that, we live in a democracy, that is under attack at the moment, if you ask me. And, that old joke that, democracy is worse than, is the worst form of government except for every other form of government. And, we're looking at that. And I think people in America, and also in Europe as well, always think, well, I have rights. I have the right to plead my case. Yet here we have people, and this has happened to some of our staff, who have gone to work in the morning and come back and their loved one isn't there anymore. And they might be in Texas, they might be in an African country if Trump gets his way with, for instance, some of our Haitian workers. And I just want to say now, if it wasn't for people from Africa who work at my organization, people from Haiti, we would probably close tomorrow. They are some of the most hardworking people who have massive responsibilities, who have families to look after. Their idea of a full-time job is 80 hours a week. It's not 40 hours a week. These are people in the main who we rely on enormously. It's not just farm workers. It's almost all industries in America. This seems to me like a massive black eye if this goes ahead, and displaying for the rest of the world an America that doesn't look like an America that was built on a constitution which is so strong. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I agree. It doesn't look like in America that our current laws, the long-standing history, have stood on. I wanted to mention a case. There's so much illegality. The small cadre of lawyers around the country who are able to take on, whether it's representing individual clients or large cases, their legal briefs detail in great detail explain what the current laws are and how, in fact, the Trump administration's actions violate them. And again, the administration's justification is we don't have to follow these laws because it's a war. Immigrants are invading and have invaded the country, or they're as if they're looming terrorist cells, when we know they're working in nursing homes, caring for patients, working all over the place, as you say. So just yesterday, a federal judge in Rhode Island issued a decision granting a preliminary injunction. The case has to do with the administration seeking to cut various immigrant eligibility for programs that had not had such narrow restrictions. And, notably, one of those programs is the Head Start program, which, has been invaluable to people living in poverty, working at the lowest paying jobs and the longest hours and the worst conditions, and, with challenges having care for their children in order to work. So the feds issued a directive that they are now interpreting a federal law passed in 1996 in a completely different way. That now means agencies have to kick out some immigrant kids from Head Start programs. Actually non-local nonprofits get the funding directly from the feds and operate the programs, and they're the ones being told to do this. And they're being told you have to now get documentation on every single child in your program, proving that they're eligible, proving that they're not in one of these categories. And the judge wrote a 60-page decision, even though this is a preliminary injunction. And in a preliminary injunction, you have to show the possibility of irreparable harm and just a likelihood of success on the merits of the case by the plaintiffs. But this judge, really went into the statute at issue in depth and what the government is up to. So one of the things, and this is a direct quote that she said, quote, "The government's new policy across the board seems to be this: show me your papers."
Wait, show me your papers?
Show me your papers. Because they made clear that in imposing new restrictions, they were also imposing on recipients of this federal funding a new documentation obligation that far exceeds anything that previously existed.
Yeah. Well, that just anybody of a certain age and anybody who's watched any movies around what happened in the 40s, they should have a cold chill blowing down their backbone, because that really is the essence of othering, isn't it? It's the notion of making sure that it is a very difficult place to be. And when you look back on the civilization of America, everybody in the world has always looked to the Statue of Liberty and that wonderful quote about the huddled masses who made America, and then you sort of stack that up again. Show your papers. It couldn't be more different than what America was built on. And when you have an administration who has a Supreme Court that is stacked, maybe this judge in Rhode Island's decision is going to be overturned by a very political court. So it's a bigger fight than just against the Trump administration at the moment, right? Right.
Unfortunately, the Trump administration has widespread support from all different types of people in the country. And, unfortunately, there's such misunderstanding of the reality of the role of immigrants in the United States and who they are, and what they've been through, and a lack of awareness of the enforcement against criminals that, has long been happening. This isn't new. in this case, it's not only chilling about show me your papers if I suspect you're an immigrant. It's show me that you're a citizen if you're claiming you're a citizen. That is going a very frightening direction. That means we might all need to carry around our birth certificates. The judge further wrote regarding the 1996 statute that's at the core of the case, and this is a direct quote: "The government argues that it has somehow interpreted this statute incorrectly for the nearly 30 years that it has been law. In its view, everyone from every past administration has misunderstood it from the start, at least until last month, when the right way to read it became clear to the government. The court is skeptical of that."
Well,
close quote.
Yeah, that court is skeptical of that. But I think that really does talk to how this administration has not a great deal of respect for law. And that if it doesn't really speak to what they're determined to do, then they're willing to trammel that history. But just going back to Massachusetts for a minute, do you know of any instance in Massachusetts where an immigrant was detained by ICE without any basis? And what happened to that person? Because that's what people really want to know.
Yeah. One of the recent cases I know about through colleagues involved an immigrant who was on his way to work, riding in a car with two other people. ICE stopped the car for no ostensible reason, no traffic violation or anything. Stopped the car, made them pull over, demanded papers from the driver. The driver didn't have papers. And then they proceeded to arrest the driver and one of the passengers without even any inquiry to that person. And that person, the passenger, was arrested, detained, and then sent to a Texas detention facility. While in detention in New England, he's a Massachusetts resident, but he was taken to Maine initially. While in Maine, he was denied access to calling anyone, friends, family, anyone, let alone a lawyer. Eventually, they gave him one call, but it could only be to his consulate. But thank God, the consulate, whoever took the call at the consulate, did get in touch with the right people, and the case made it to an experienced immigration lawyer, who then spent 24 hours steady, assessing the client's situation and writing a legal brief and then filing at the end of the day in the wee hours a lawsuit challenging the arrest and detention of this immigrant. And the judge promptly ruled in their favor, and the man was released. This shows the importance of access to an attorney. And one of the big problems is not only are there not enough attorneys to take on the big cases and not enough attorneys to help all the immigrants being targeted and arrested or in fear who need advice before they do anything. There's even fewer lawyers in a position to drop everything and skilled enough to file a case in 24 hours.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and we're running out of time, Melanie, I'm sorry, because this is something that we could talk about all week, but I think that really describes what's going on in this country. And, I always like to finish on a positive note. I think having conversations about this and telling the real story of what immigration means to America, not over the past year, but over the past 275 years or 250 years, is really important, because America is built on immigration, and its strength is immigration, and its strength is the diversity of the thought that people have in this country. It's not a surprise that America is the number one economy in the world, and this seems to be a direct attack on that. Any final words of positivity as you look at this? And it's a difficult
Positivity?
question. Yeah, it's a difficult question.
Well, I'm grateful to have colleagues and have worked with people and had the opportunity to work with immigrant clients, to hear their stories and see what they've overcome, et cetera. And I've been part of a small group of lawyers who give their entire career to low-income clients, including immigrants. I did just want to say that if there's anyone listening to this who has any contact with immigrants and wants to give advice, the most important thing they can do to help set up the client to be able to reach a lawyer in the unfortunate event that they are one of the ones arrested is the immigrant should scan all their documents related to immigration, anything, and give information which can be detailed in handouts, etc. Have that preserved by a trusted person, and that may be the only way they can get access to a lawyer who can assess their case and offer representation.
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice. And, as we finish here, I'm just glad that there are people like you and your colleagues who are rallying to help in this sort of manufactured crisis that we have in this country. And we are a democracy, and we're a strong democracy. And things tend to change when things get untenable, and that's what we can hope for. Melanie, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us. I know it's a very difficult subject, but one very important conversation to have at the moment.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate your concern with these issues.
Thanks so much, Melanie. See you next time, everybody.